Hi, welcome back to Mysteries Channel. Thanks for clicking on my video. You know, winter's already here, but today let's go over what cold is and what it means for the people of Earth. Every once in a while, I might just randomly yell, "Winter is coming." Just ignore me, continue on with the rest of the video. Don't mind me. That being said, today is one of my wacky theory days. My wacky theory is that mass migrations of our ancient ancestors were the result of ice ages or little ice ages, and every time we decided to leave Africa, the homeland, it was directly the cause of an ice age. It's hard to say how many times this has happened because they're still getting all the information out on it. There's been a lot of DNA testing that's kind of opening the door to what we know and understand about our evolution and how we have changed and evolved with our leaving of Africa. So I'm going to leave that part open. I think right now the main consensus is there have been about 4 mass migrations. I know that it's kind of weird to think that this one thing alone could be the result of us inhabiting the entire Earth, but maybe when we get more into it, after I go over some facts, it'll be not as crazy and wacky. Looking through the human record, there is one indisputable fact. There's probably a couple more, but one that I came up with, while researching this video. And that is that one of the greatest erasers to human civilization is the cold. The cold tends to bring out the worst in us. Well, in most cases, every once in a while, there's a group of people that deal with it well and actually, thrive off of it. But for the most of humanity, it's not a pretty picture. Colder seasons of the year are marked by a lack of food as supplies run low, increase in diseases as many people are clustered together in confined spaces, and some are even affected by seasonal affective disorder, the winter blues, among many, many, many other things. These are things that affect anyone that is living in an area that gets seasonably cold for at least a couple months of the year. Now imagine winter lasting for 8 months. How would and could that affect us? What if this happened for many years in a row, decades, hundreds of years even? Thousands of years? The Earth has gone through many cold spells. We are technically in one right now. The weather on Earth is a fickle little bitch. Climates change. We're having discussions all over the Earth right now. It's politically charged and it has been branded global warming in the past, and right now it's climate change. And technically, both tags are right. These things are happening. The cause that we are given is wild speculation, and at the worst, it's out and out just false. I truly believe that we are meant to take care of the environment, meant to take measures to ensure that we do not poison it. We are here to conserve it. But I am not convinced that what is happening today, with the temperature rising on Earth, I don't think that this is a people problem. There have been 5 significant ice ages in Earth's history. The Huronian, 2.4 to 2.1 billion years ago. The Cryogenian was 850 to 635 million years ago. The Andean-Saharan was 460 to 430 million years ago. The Karoo was 360 to 260 million years ago. And the Quaternary. The Quaternary started 2.6 million years ago, and we are still presently in it. The Earth has 3 main stages. Greenhouse. Greenhouse is when tropical temperatures extend to both poles. There's evidence that this stage occurred after several different ice ages, and most recently Antarctica was ice-free about 34 million years ago, and it lasted for about 20 million years. Basically, ice formed on Antarctica yesterday. Icehouse. Icehouse is when there is some permanent ice, although the extent varies greatly. It's basically where we are now. And then there is snowball, the most terrifying of them all. Snowball. It's when the planet's entire surface is frozen over. The first ice age recorded, the Huronian, cast Earth into a snowball stage. During the second ice age, the Cryogenian, Earth was cast twice into snowball stage. The ice age masses accumulate over tens of thousands of years and recede within the space of a few thousand years. It takes a long time for it to get cold, but when it warms up, it happens pretty quickly. Now we know why. It's not only that the surface temperatures that determine whether an ice age grows or shrinks, and the ice age that we are in now is suspected of occurring because of the rise of the Himalayan mountains and the effect that it had on the weather of Earth. During the first 2/3 of the Quaternary, the ice advanced and retreated roughly every 41,000 years. Sounds like a cycle, right? This is the same tempo as the changes in the tilt of Earth's axis. About 1 million years ago, the ice switched to a 100,000-year cycle for reasons that were until pretty recently a total mystery. The explanation for cyclical alteration of ice and warm periods stems from Serbian mathematician Milutin Milankovic. He was born in 1879 and died in 1958. And he calculated the changes in Earth's orbit and the resulting insolation on Earth, thus becoming the first to describe that the cyclical changes in insolation are the result of an overlapping of a whole series of cycles. The tilt of the Earth's axis fluctuates by about 2 degrees in a 41,000-year cycle. Moreover, Earth's axis gyrates in a cycle of 26,000 years, much like the spinning of the top. You know, with the Mayans we're talking about. Finally, Earth's elliptical orbit around the sun changes in a cycle around 100,000 years in 2 respects. On the one hand, it changes from a weaker elliptical circular form to a stronger one. On the other hand, the axis of this elliptis turns in the plane of Earth's orbit. The spinning of Earth's axis and the elliptical rotation of the axis cause the day on Earth, which is closest to the sun, to migrate through the calendar year in a cycle of around 20,000 years. Currently, the perihelion is in the beginning of January. In about 10,000 years, however, it will be the beginning of July. This is the reason why Julius Caesar changed the calendar. There have been many overlapping glaciations within the Quaternary, the ice age that we are currently in. Between 130,000 and 114,000 years ago, the ice retreated during the Ionian Interglacial and then advanced again to create the glacial that most people know as the Ice Age. As these ages occur, climates change differently throughout the world. The climate may change drastically in the upper reaches of the north and slightly in the south, and vice versa. But eventually, the cooling becomes global, with lower swings as you get closer to the poles. As the glacial period drew to a close and the temperatures began to rise, there were 2 final cold snaps. First, the chilly older Dryas of 14,700 years to 13,400 years ago transformed most of Europe from the forest to tundra, like modern-day Siberia. After a brief respite, the younger Dryas between 12,800 years ago to 11,500 years ago froze Europe solid within a matter of months. 12,000 years ago, the great ice sheets retreated at the beginning of the latest interglacial, the Flandrian, allowing humans to return to the northern latitudes. This period has been relatively warm and the climate relatively stable, although it has been slightly colder than the last interglacial, and the sea levels are currently at least 3 meters lower. So interesting, all these things we keep hearing about in science, how we're destroying the earth and we're rising sea levels and the earth is warming. We're cooler and sea levels are lower than the last interglacial period. This isn't us. And then from about the year 1300 to about the year 1870, there was what was termed a Little Ice Age. The Little Ice Age was a period of cooling that occurred after the medieval warm period. Those knights running around in their freaking Hummers and gas guzzlers, know what I'm saying? Although it was not a true ice age, the term was introduced by scientific literature by Francois Matthias in 1939, and man, did it have a catastrophic effect on humanity. Historians have argued that the cultural response of the consequence of the Little Ice Age consisted of violent scapegoating. The prolonged cold, dry periods brought drought upon many communities, resulting in poor crop growth, poor livestock survival, and increased activity of pathogens and disease vectors. Although these communities had some contingency plans, such as better crop mixes, emergency grain stocks, and international food trade, these did not always prove to be effective, especially in the long term. Communities often lashed out via violent crimes, including robbery, murder, sexual offenses such as adultery, bestiality, and rape, and accusations increased as well. Europeans sought explanation for the famine, disease, and social unrest that they were experiencing, leading to an act of placing blame upon the innocent. Evidence from several studies indicate that increases in violent actions against marginalized people that were held responsible for the Little Ice Age overlap with years of particularly cold, dry weather. Disease tends to intensify under the same conditions that unemployment and economic difficulties arise. prolonged cold, dry seasons. Both of these outcomes, disease and unemployment, enhance each other, generating a lethal positive feedback loop. Cold summers and ice growth begin abruptly between 1275 and 1300, followed by a substantial intensification in about the year 1430 to 1455. North America reports having severe winters. Samuel Chamberlain reported burying ice along the shores of Lake Superior in June of 1608. Both Europeans and indigenous peoples suffered excess mortality in Maine during the winter of 1607 to 1608. Extreme frost was reported in Virginia at the same time. Native Americans formed leagues in response to food shortages. The Journal of de Troyes, who led an expedition to James Bay in 1686, recorded that the bay was so littered with so much floating ice that he could hide behind it in his canoe. This was dated July 1st. In the winter of 1780, New York Harbor froze, allowing people to walk from Manhattan to Staten Island. In China, warm weather crops such as oranges were abandoned completely in areas where they had been grown for centuries. Also, 2 periods of most frequent typhoon strikes happened to coincide with the coldest and driest periods in northern and central China. In Ethiopia and North Africa, permanent snow was reported on mountain peaks at levels that do not occur today. Timbuktu was an important city on the Trans-Saharan caravan route, was flooded at least 13 times by the Niger River. There are no records of similar flooding before or since then. Basically, I'll say this. The climate starts to change. It's obvious that it's not going back. People tried to wait it out for about 100 years, and then realization hits them in the face. Nope. We need to try something new because we're not going to make it. Great expeditions are made by explorers and a migration of the world begins again. The Dutch are moving to Africa. The English, the French, the Spanish are conquering the New World. India, and basically anywhere equatorial. War is raging everywhere. Feudal states are fighting all over Asia and Europe. The Ming Dynasty collapses. Japan has been warring amongst itself incessantly. The 30 Years' War helps kill off large populations in Europe. And the rival kingdoms throughout Africa are warring with one another. During this period, the Dutch sailed to Australia, the New World is rediscovered, and mass migration around the world flourishes. And I just happen to think, well, this is my theory anyway, that this is pretty much exactly what happened to our ancient ancestors coming out of Africa. No, they did not see huge glaciers coming at them. What they saw was an absolute lack of water, complete and utter devastation of their crops, and it seemed like it was a better idea than to die of thirst and starvation to go and see what else was out there in the world, because at least maybe that was a chance, better than the chance of just sitting there and dying. And since I think the timeline is off anyway, I won't venture to say dates, except that I believe that people have been in the Americas for more than 15,000 years. And I will say that it is completely convoluted and, to be honest, extremely difficult, even for people who have dedicated their entire lives to studying this, to know for sure. Honestly, I really wish that we could take the DNA samples that we have from people already and back check it against core samples and also tree rings to see if there is like a component that says, yes, 75,000 years ago, people left Africa and there is something major happened in the world. 45,000 years ago, another group left Africa. 115,000 years ago, whatever the actual numbers are. It would be pretty cool to be able to tie our mutations in our body to things that were happening in Earth. Well, that's really all I got. So tell me what you think at the bottom. You have yourselves a great day.